Mia Khalifa is one of the most searched names on the internet, and that alone tells you everything about how powerful, messy, and permanent internet fame can be. But here's the part most people miss. Mia did not just become famous. She became a symbol, a headline, a controversy people repeated so often that the actual person got buried under the image. And once that happens, good luck ever being seen as anything else. Because with Mia Khalifa, the internet did what it always does. It took one chapter of a real human life, exaggerated it, recycled it, memed it, argued about it, and then acted like that was the whole story. It was not. Mia was born in Beirut, Lebanon, in 1993. She grew up in a Catholic family, went to private school, and lived a life that had nothing to do with the internet image people now associate with her name. Then her family moved to the United States after September 11th, and that move changed everything. And not in a simple way. She has said that adjusting to America was difficult. She felt out of place. She was bullied. She did not fit in socially. That kind of experience matters, because when a person grows up feeling unwanted or unseen, they often become extremely sensitive to attention later in life. That is where her story starts to get interesting. Because people do not usually wake up one day and randomly end up in the adult industry. There is always a path, and with Mia, the early story has always felt like a mix of insecurity, attention, and the need to be wanted. She has spoken about not feeling confident for much of her early life. She went to college, worked normal jobs, and tried to figure things out like anybody else. But at some point, her life started shifting in a way that made her impossible to ignore. She lost weight. She had breast surgery. Her appearance changed. And once that happened, the way people treated her changed too. That is the ugly truth about attention. The moment people start looking at you differently, life stops feeling ordinary. Mia has described men approaching her in ways that made it obvious her physical presence had suddenly become a kind of currency. And in a world built on attention, that kind of shift can become dangerous fast. Because once validation starts coming in, it is hard to tell the difference between opportunity and temptation. And that is where things moved into the adult industry. This is where her story becomes the kind of thing the internet never lets go of. Once Mia entered that world, everything accelerated. She did not slowly become known. She exploded. And not everybody explodes in the same way. Some people get a little attention, some get a few viral clips, and some become names that people know even if they have never watched a single video. Mia became that kind of name. Not because she was the biggest performer in the world for the longest time. Not because she had the most polished public image. But because the internet latched onto her and never let go. And then came the moment that changed everything. One controversial scene turned her into a global talking point. The video with hijab with her co-star Juliana Vega went viral. People who had never heard of her suddenly knew the name. People who had never searched for her were suddenly repeating it. And in a matter of days, she went from being a person to being a phenomenon. That is what makes internet fame so brutal. That scene made Mia instantly recognizable. But it also made her permanently vulnerable to public judgment. The internet loves to pretend that adult industry fame is only about glamour, money, and attention. But the reality is much more complicated. A person can become highly visible and still feel completely exposed, used, and trapped by the very thing that made them famous. That is the part people skip. Mia has repeatedly said that the industry was not what it seemed, that she was young. She has also claimed that the money and control people imagine she had were not really the reality. The constant threats by ISIS and Islamic culture made her life devastating. That is why her name still gets clicks. Not because the tale is neat, not because it is easy, but because it is messy, controversial, and loaded with tension. After the adult industry chapter, she tried to move on. She tried to build a normal life. She tried to create a public image outside that single identity. But the internet is terrible at letting people evolve. Every time she tried to move forward, the same old label pulled her back. That is the curse of being internet famous for the wrong reason. You do not just get a past. You get a permanent search result. She later stepped into media, sports commentary, and social platforms. She built a huge following. She learned how to use this same internet that once trapped her. But even then, the old image never fully disappeared. It kept coming back. People kept reducing her to the same thing, as if the rest of her life was just background noise. And that is where the real tension sits. Because Mia's story is not only about adult content, It is about what happens when a human being gets turned into a public object. It is about what happens when a moment gets bigger than a life. And that is why her story still works as content. It has shock value. It has backlash. It has reinvention. It has fame, humiliation, money, control, regret, and a constant fight over who gets to define the truth. That combination keeps people watching. And Mia's entire internet legacy is built on that tension between what people think they know and what may actually be true. The public remembers the image. The public remembers the controversy. The public remembers the label. But the part that lasts is the fallout. The fallout is the real story. The pressure, the judgment, the endless replaying of a chapter she may never escape. The way fame can feel like exposure instead of success.